Hello everyone, myself Anjum Khan, and I will be teaching you Science 2 section of Science and Technology Standard 10th SSC. Today we are going to start with the 10th topic, that is disaster management. There are total 10 chapters in this textbook, and purposely I have selected this 10th topic, that is disaster management, so that you can connect this topic to your last year's disaster management topic, which we have already seen in standard 9th. In this chapter we are going to see disaster, types of disaster, effects of disaster, effect and impact of disaster, disaster management, the nature and extent of disaster, first aid and emergency actions, and last one is mock drill, which is the new concept for you all. Conceptually, the topic is very easy, and I have selected this topic so that you can easily make notes just sitting at home and you can learn it in this quarantine time. So let us start with the lesson. Can you recall what is disaster? So here we all have to recall the disaster which we have seen in the standard 9th and 10th. Disaster is nothing but the sudden incident, or you can say disaster is nothing but the sudden event that causes heavy damage to life as well as property. I'll repeat the definition. Disaster is nothing but the sudden event or sudden incident which causes heavy loss to the life as well as to the property. Which disaster have you experienced in your area? So if you remember, last year in 2019 we were having heavy rainfall in our area, and that time we all have suffered with the disaster like flood. So that disaster example you all can write. Similarly, right now also we are suffering from a very worldwide disaster, that is nothing but the pandemic coronavirus disease. That also comes under disaster. So that also example you all can write as a disaster. Third question is, what are the effects of disaster on local and surrounding condition? So obviously, whatever local and surrounding condition now you can see of this disaster, that you all can write. That many people they get affected during this disaster. Okay, then schools, colleges, offices, they are shut down. Then the people, they are in some troublesome situation. Then big industries are also closed. Many people are losing their lives in this disaster. Many people they are kept in the isolation wards. They are also suffering from this kind of disaster. So all this condition you all can write. Now let us start with the topic disaster. So as I have told you, disaster is nothing but the sudden event that causes huge loss of property as well as life. Here they have given the types of disaster, that is flood, wet and dry famines, cyclones, earthquake and volcanoes. These are some of the examples of natural disaster. These are all of sudden troubles to the mankind. Such events, they cause sudden change in the environment and thereby they cause damage to it. Environment is also damaged due to the use of natural resources for our development. This leads to sudden disaster, unexpected to human. This can be called as man-made disaster. Here, one more definition is given by United Nations, which you all can highlight over here, that the sudden event that leads to huge loss of life as well as property is called as disaster. Now, in this definition, the word huge and sudden are important because Since this disaster they occur suddenly, they cannot be predicted and precautions are not possible. Huge losses to the property occurs in that area of disaster, and there are long term effects are also there on the society due to the loss of life and property. Various areas of life like economic, social, cultural, political, law, administration, they get affected due to it. The life in the area of disaster gets disturbed completely. There is a loss of life and property of the people in distress. Distress means it is the condition, or you can say it is the state of being very upset, or you can say it is the state of being in heavy pain. Earlier, we have studied the types of disaster and the measures to be taken. If you remember, students, we have studied there are two types of disaster. They are nothing but the natural disaster as well as man-made disaster. If you remember, we have studied under natural disaster, we have studied the disaster like famine, cyclones, earthquakes, and volcanoes. And under man-made disaster, we all have studied the disasters like accidents. We all have studied the disasters like accidents, riots, and various other disasters. So let us see few more ways of classifying this disaster in this topic. There are other ways also of classification of disaster, which include first one like catastrophic disaster, and the second is disaster making impact for long duration. I repeat, catastrophic disaster as well as disaster making the impact for long duration. So let us see first one, that is catastrophic disaster. Catastrophic disaster means the one which causes the huge loss of property as well as life. In Marathi, if you want to translate this word catastrophic, it is kashtakari, you can say, which causes lots of pain. Examples of this catastrophic disaster are cyclone in Odisha. Okay, Odisha, I hope you all know that Odisha, it is always prone to the cyclones. Okay, always different types of cyclones, they come in this area, and there is a huge loss of life as well as property in this area. Then catastrophic earthquakes of Gujarat and Latur. Similarly, in these areas like Gujarat and Latur, these areas are prone to the earthquakes. Often earthquakes, some earthquakes they are of low intensity, whereas some earthquakes they cause huge loss of life as well as property. Then frequently buzzing cyclones in coastals of Andhra Pradesh. Even over here we have seen the Andhra Pradesh as well as the area like Kerala. Over here frequently buzzing cyclones they come and they cause huge loss of property as well as life, which leads to the total chaos, huge loss of life and property in that respective region. However, irrespective of all this, life has always returned to the normal within short time. Now, the second type we are going to study, that is disaster which are making the impact for longer duration. Now, the examples of such disasters are famine. So, if you remember, we have studied in the standard 9th and in standard 8th as well that famines, how they cause long-term effect to the human life. Then, various problems of crop, strikes of workers, rising level of ocean, and desertification. These are few examples of disaster which cause long term effect on the human. So in this way we can classify the disaster. Here on the next page you can see few pictures in which the first picture is of flood, the another picture is of waterlogged area, the third picture is of train accident, and the fourth picture shows the earthquake in certain area. Now over here they have asked us that we have to discuss all this disaster and we are supposed to write their effect of this disaster, as well as we also have to discuss that how it could have been saved from how the lives could have been saved from this disaster, and we are supposed to discuss in the classroom. Now let me tell you that the example or this the question of train accident was asked in the this year's board paper, you can say, in the March 2020 Science 2 examination. This question was asked by showing the picture of train accident. The similar picture was there in the paper, and they have asked you to write the effect of this disaster, identify the disaster and write the effect of disaster. So this disaster is of train accident obviously, and effects you can write that loss of life, loss of property. In this way we all have to write the effects of flood, waterlogged area and earthquake also, that I will be sending you in the form of notes. Don't worry about it. Now the next question is, can you tell how can disaster be classified depending upon its various criteria? So suppose we have to classify this disaster, okay, based on certain criteria, then what that criteria will be? So actually there are 4 criterias by which we all can classify the disaster. The first criteria is obviously the extent of disaster. The second criteria will be the reason of the disaster. The third criteria will be period of disaster, whether it is causing short term or long term effect, and the fourth criteria will be the long term effect of disaster. Long term effects of disaster. So basically on the basis of all these 4 criteria we all can classify the disaster. So let us see, based on this criteria, how we can classify disaster. So here is our next topic, that is types of disaster. So here according to textbook, the disasters are classified into 3 categories: geophysical, biological and man-made disaster. Over here they have given few examples of each type. Geophysical can be further classified into geological and atmospheric disaster. Geological disasters are those disasters which are taking place due to the movements which are taking place inside the earth. Okay, for example, earthquake, volcano, tsunami, landslides, landfall, erosion, alkalization, flooding, etc. And over here I think you need to understand the term alkalization. Alkalization means the soil turns salty and it becomes useless for the growth of any crop. Okay, that time we can say that earth has become alkaline, so that is called as alkalization of land. Okay, and that also comes under geological disaster. The next is atmospheric disaster. As we all know that continuous changes are taking place in the changes are taking place into the atmosphere, and due to which few disasters are caused. For example, hot and cold waves. Hot and cold waves means sometimes the temperature rises very high and sometimes the temperature in certain areas goes down, due to which we have to suffer from the problems like snowstorms, snowfall, cyclones, hailstorm, drought, flood, meteorite, sunspots, etc. Second type is biological disaster. For biological disaster, obviously, few plants and animals are responsible, because plants and animals, they come, or we categorize them into living things. So the disasters which are caused due to the plants and animals are coming under the biological disaster. Now, plants, because of plants, what kind of disaster may take place? So here are the examples: forest fire, fungal disease spreading. Okay, now over here the few plants are there on which fungus grows, because fungus, if you speak individually, it is not neither coming under plant nor it is coming under animal, but fungus, it is one of the separate class of living organism. So when it grows on the plants, it may, and when these plants will come in contact with any human being, they may cause few fungal diseases in those animals or human being. So fungal disease spreading, like for example blister. Then weeds means unwanted grass which are growing along with the main crop. So aquatic, examples of weeds are aquatic weeds, carrot grasses, and some common grasses. Okay, they may prove disastrous for the main crop, because they directly compete with the water and nutrition with the main crop, due to which the growth of main crop may get affected. So these were the disasters which are caused by plants. Now let us see the disasters which are caused by animals. Animals, they may be responsible for the spread of infectious viruses, like we are talking recently, we are going through the phase coronavirus, very dangerous, and it is said to be what you can say, spread by the bats. Okay, so animals, they are few animals, they may prove responsible for the spread of infectious viruses. Bacteria, like for example bacteria of disease cholera, malaria, hepatitis, and plague. And as you all know, all these diseases are fatal. Then few insects, okay, like you can say mosquito or any other insect. Then bite of few poisonous animals like snake bite, it may prove disastrous for human being. The third type is man-made disaster. It can be unknown or it can be on the international level. In unknown category, the disasters like poisonous gases, then atomic test, then unplanned actions like accidents, all these examples they come. And in international disasters, examples are war between two countries, you can say, fire, bomb blast, forced migration of few people, then terrorism, rapes, child labor, etc. These are the examples of international man-made disaster. So in this way, based upon these four criteria, disasters can be classified into three types: geophysical, biological, and man-made disasters. Now, today we'll stop here. Tomorrow we are going to see the next topic, that is effects of disaster and the phases of disaster. Thank you.